Hey everybody, my name is Sid. I'm the owner of 360 Home Inspections, and I am here with Kristin Murphy of Mission Realty with EXP. And we are on site today, and we are going to take some time to talk about some of the things that you can look for during your showings as a realtor or as a client that may save you some time when it comes to preparing your offer or whether or not this is the house for you, or just prepare your client or be prepared for the home inspection.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Sydney.
That's right. So we're going to walk around. We're going to talk about some of the things you can look for and then see how it goes.
One thing we start out outside, anytime you're at a showing, you want to identify the materials that are used in the house, things that may come up later in the inspection, so it's not quite a shock to the client. And as Sydney likes to say, then it doesn't kill the deal because they expected some of those items. So one thing is we always identify the type of siding, whether it's a wood material, vinyl, that sort of thing, and if there's anything to be concerned about, windows, roof, etc.
Yep. So what we have is masonite. We typically refer to this as masonite siding, and this is like a precursor to your fiber cement or hardy board, hardy plank, James Hardy, that which is a manufacturer brand name. What we see today. And a lot of times you'll see a lot of places on here that you're starting to see some deterioration because once it gets wet, it starts to kind of fall apart a little bit. And I don't think I've ever seen a house that had masonite that was 100% intact or did not have moisture damage.
If it's just one board or two boards, you can replace those. But if it's more than 30% of the whole siding, then at that point it's more cost effective to just replace the entire house as opposed to that 30% of those boards. So you want to identify if is it one or two localized spots or is it more so around the exterior of the house.
One of the favorite parts of the inspection on our end is always the crawl space. And I know as a realtor, you're wearing your fancy showing clothes, so you don't always want to go down there, but it's always a good idea just to be able to look, open the door, look inside, and you'll be able to see or tell a lot about a house just by being able to stick your head in this one. For example, this one, we're missing a vapor barrier, so it's pretty reasonable to expect that there may be some mold growth in there, maybe some moisture issues in there because of the lack of a vapor barrier and given the age of the house. We can see that the dryer vent is hanging down, so it's been discharging the lint, the humidity, and whatnot into the crawl space from the dryer vent. We can see some tears in the ductwork. The ductwork's torn in a couple places. And you can also look at what type of piping you have. So given the age of this house being in the 80s, you want to see if it has copper or the dreaded polybutylene that we often see that makes realtors mad at us when we see it. As well as the waste pipe, we can see that's PVC versus other types, like older homes have cast iron, things like that. So just, again, gives your client and gives you an idea of what you're going to see as the overall condition come home inspection time, or whether or not, again, this is where they want to invest their money.
And we're going to leave all the structural things to the home inspector. So when Sydney comes to the house, he's obviously going to crawl through the entire crawl space and not just look at those things, but also look at the structural, the piers, if there's any things overall with the house. But for a realtor, we can at least stick our heads in and identify those problems that he just mentioned. So again, the client is aware of that going into it and use that as an education of why the crawl space is so important. Typically, sellers and homeowners don't look in their crawl space until it's time to sell. So oftentimes, those things can even be a surprise to the seller themselves.
Major cost item, as clients are always asking, is the roof. What's the condition of the roof? And while you may not climb on it, and not every realtor owns a drone to be able to see it, you can still see a lot of it from the ground. So when you're looking at the overall age or the condition of it. You're looking to see if it's faded, see if you can see any cupping or curling. And on this roof, you can see where the flashing alongside of the siding is starting to pop up the shingles. You can see that you're getting some staining on the shingles, which is all indication of the age of the roof. So this house was built, what, 80s?
Yes.
1980s. So we can probably deduce from that we're on our second roof, and we're probably at least halfway, if not in the final third, of its life expectancy at this point.
And we always try to identify the type of shingles as well. That goes along with all the different materials. There's different types of shingles which have a different life expectancy. You can have 20 to 25 year shingles. You can have 35. and then you can have 50-year and on up.
So as you're walking around the house, you can always look at the deck, look at the steps. Deck is always a source, or can be a source, of high cost repairs. So just looking at the age of the deck, of the wood, looking to see if there's, again, any moisture damage, seeing how well it's constructed, to see if it's attached to the house, if the siding's been removed, if they use bolts versus nails versus nothing. All those things are key. We always find something wrong with the deck, and we don't always expect everybody else to see what we see, but just the overall picture of the deck. So with the cost of everything these days, any repairs to the deck can be costly. Maybe not immediate, maybe it will be, depending on the overall condition of the deck, and especially the height of the deck. The higher the deck, the more safe you want to make it, and the more you want to make sure that it's in solid condition prior to moving in. So this is one of those things that we talk about when you're walking around the house. You can kind of see where there's been some patchwork. And if you're not paying attention to some of the stuff, it's easy to overlook. And then some of the stuff is a lot more obvious that there's been some homemade repairs done here. And again, as we talked about on the other side, you see some ants crawling down there, which is a sign of moisture. Ants like moisture. But as we talked on the other side, you know, the risk is always going to be, how extensive is this damage? How extensive is the repair going to be? We got the windows affected, we got the window seal affected, we got the siding underneath it affected, and there's a good probability that a lot of the framing underneath could be affected as well. So just one more thing to look for as you're walking around the house. Another item you can look at is gutters and downspouts. Gutters are not a code requirement, so sometimes houses don't have gutters, but it's not required. But if they do, you can see where this one is terminating on the ground and it's not being taken away from the house. So it's digging a hole right by the foundation, and then you just got to think about all the water for however many years it's been doing that, that's been gathering right here. This is typically how and where we start seeing foundation issues, is water just being dumped by the foundation, or the gutters are damaged, or they've been clogged or stay clogged for, you know, however many years, and it's not moving the water away from the house. So you always want to just check to see what the overall condition is of these gutters, make sure it's moving water away from the foundation, and then just looking at this area to make sure there's no cracking or settlement or movement of the foundation in this corner or wherever the gutters are terminating at. All right, so we're out in the garage, and as you're making your way through the house, the garage, if you have a garage, is typically a place for the electrical panel. And you don't need to take the panel off to see the overall condition of it, but what you're really looking for is see how big the panel is. You know, today's standards is about 200 amps. So older homes, they go anywhere from 60 amps to 100 amps to 150 amps, 125 amps, sizes like that. But 200 amps is where you want to be, and then you can look in the panel and see if there's any knockouts, which means that can you add anything to the panel. So if you have a 60 amp panel, it's a smaller panel, and there's no place to add anything else, then the client may need to upgrade their panel to meet today's needs and power usages, depending on what it is that they plan on doing. You know, if the house was lived in by, you know, an older couple, or maybe like a widow, right, that they're by themselves, been there for 60 years, and then the family moving in has 3 kids and they're married and whatnot. That's right. You may have to upgrade your panel at that point.
And that's one thing that agents can also identify. You know, we don't need to be looking at the electrical components of it. We're going to leave that to the home inspector and the professionals if you need an electrician to identify anything. But typically, the size, like Sydney mentioned, but also the sheet that's on there will typically tell you the amperage of it. So we can just take a quick peek at that and make sure that it says 200 amps. Obviously, if it's lower, we would identify that for the client.
And while you're out here, you can also look at the water heater. This specific water heater is a gas water heater. And again, just like the water or the HVAC system, you can look at the size of it to see how, if it's 50 gallons, 40 gallons, 28 gallons, you know, 75 gallons, whatever it is, to see if it's going to meet your needs, and the date and the overall condition. So we're going to look at any corrosion around the pipes, any corrosion around the unit itself. We're going to look at, again, the age of it. These are typically 10 to 12 year life expectancies. And the average cost is about $800 to $1,200 to replace these units. So you just want a better idea of, again, when you move into the home, for the inspection, things like that. What are you going to see? What can you expect? Sooner rather than later, and those types of items are some of the things we're going to be looking at. But typically in a garage, you're going to have your HVAC unit, your water heater, and your electrical panel somewhere in the garage. So it's a quick, clean sweep just to see the overall conditions of them, checking the ages, checking the amperages, and seeing if this is, again, suitable for you.
Exactly. And you always want to identify if it's electric or gas powered, because some clients prefer one over the other. So it's important to educate them on that, as well as Sydney mentioned the ages. That goes right along with what we mentioned about the HVAC system outside. If it's an older system that is the potential to break or need to be replaced immediately in the next couple of years, sometimes that's not financially a good investment for the client, or they just want to make sure that they're aware of that so they can budget or invest in that home warranty that would cover those repairs or those replacements.
All right, so we're standing in the kitchen, and for the most part, we're going to check all the appliances and check the cabinets and things like that. But for the walkthroughs, you're really looking on your end more of the overall condition of it, right?
Correct.
So, because a lot of people want updated kitchens and things like that.
Right.
So you're looking at the cabinets, you're looking at the top, the surfaces, and whatnot, just to kind of see, is there a dishwasher? Is there not a dishwasher? As you talked about with the water heater, gas stove versus electric stove, because some people have preferences. We get that question a lot. How hard is it to convert electric to gas if there's already gas running to the house? Things
Right.
like that. So, but for the most part, it's a good place to check your water, their pressure, and you can check to see if you're getting hot water. You may not have thermal or a laser
All the
gun.
fancy tools.
Yeah, but you can at least see if it's getting hot.
Yes.
And whatnot. And again, underneath the cabinets to check for quick leaks, and again, type of piping, things like that. But yeah, for the most part, this is more of where the realtor is going to come in and kind of say, hey, this is a 1970s house or a 1980s kitchen, or this has been updated, or things like that.
Yes, exactly. We always note the types of appliances that they have. Do the appliances convey? Because that's money out of the client's pocket as well. You can see here on the floor, this is tile flooring. So we would point out the types of flooring. There's big cracks throughout the entire kitchen. So obviously that would be something that a client would have to replace down the line, which could potentially be expensive. Sydney will run the dishwasher a full cycle on inspection and check for leaks and underneath in the crawl space because it's been running. But we can turn the water on and look for just quick leaks under, especially when you're in a vacant house. That's another thing that we identify. Vacant houses that have been sitting a while where the water hasn't been run and the appliances haven't been running, that can sometimes cause a problem when we start messing around turning everything on. So, we want to identify if it's owner-occupant and all of the things have been in use, or if they've been standstill for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the floor, you're looking at this floor because it's here. We're here, and it's cracked and whatnot. And that could be a couple different things. It could be just because it's a bad lay, right? They didn't properly prepare the floor, so the tile wasn't laid the way it was supposed to be, so we were getting cracks. It could have been some sediment because the flooring is a little old, and tile cracks, right? But as you're walking through the house in general, there's something you want to pay attention to. Is it just an isolated place, or are we having some flooring issues throughout the home? A lot of people will tell you that 100-year-old homes, 50-year-old homes, they're just going to be uneven because the house settles, and that may be true to a point. But there's also a point where it's like, hey, this may be some actual foundation issues. So as you're walking through and you're seeing cracks on the wall, cracks on the ceiling, floors uneven, big drops, little drops, cracked tile, it's something that, hey, we want to put an offer on it, cool, but just be prepared that when we get to the home inspection and they get into the crawl space, they may find some things, and those things can be expensive to repair, and you got to be prepared, depending on what those negotiations are like. Can you ask for repairs? Can you not ask for repairs? Things like that.
The home inspection.
Exactly. So these are just things to look for as you're walking through the house that can indicate, not always, but can indicate bigger ticket problems.
And all of those red flags, as they compound and you end up with quite a few red flags, to Sydney's point is we're going to do a little bit more in that due diligence period to investigate why things are the way they are.
Yeah.
We might just have to do a little bit more detective work, say in the crawl space, to make sure that everything's okay if you're noting multiple items.
Yeah, and it's important as a realtor to keep track of this stuff as you're going through the house,
Yes.
because it's very easy. Like, oh, you know what, we can fix that, not a big deal, right? But by the time you're on the 15th, we can fix that. The client may not be adding all that stuff up. So it's very important. Like, hey, look, we've said 12, 15, 20 times about things you want to change. That stuff's going to add up, especially when you start digging into it and you find more stuff that
Exactly.
that's going to blow the budget out, right? Because there's always something. And then all of a sudden, goes, this goes from pretty manageable to, you're right, we wasn't keeping track of how much we want to change, and now we're getting a little bit concerned about that.
And especially if you're seeing more than one house in a day, we always urge clients to make those pros and cons lists. If you're okay with some updating, great. But when you see 8 houses in a row, everything tends to blend together, and you may forget that you've compounded all of these items. Cracked floor, siding, a leaking sink, the fact that it doesn't come with a washer or dryer and you have to purchase those items, all of those compounds. So you really want to take good notes per house if you're seeing more than one in a day or even in a week.
Yeah, because sometimes realtors send us to go check on things during the home inspection just for us not to find them. Like, oh,
that was a different house.
That was a different house,
yes.
Absolutely, because they all run, especially in the market that we're coming out of.
Yes, yeah. Everything's moving so quickly.
Yep.
So it's good to have detailed notes if clients are interested.
Absolutely. Yep. So one of the things that some houses come with is fireplaces, gas fireplaces, wood fireplaces. But the important thing to remember, we come in and we'll check the firebox, we'll check the hearth and the mantle, and we'll check the exterior of the chimney. But most of the time, unless the realtor forgets to check the box, these are typically as is. So we always recommend, even after we inspected, a level 2 chimney sweep to come in and do their inspection if you plan on utilizing the chimneys.
Exactly. In the state of Virginia, it might be different in other states, but for us, we always mark in the contract that fireplaces, flues, chimneys convey as is. So Sydney will do the visual check, but if you plan to use the fireplace, it is definitely a good idea to have that as a separate inspection. We will note, is it wood burning? Is it gas? Is it electric? That way they know the types of components to look for, and also it could be a personal preference. Most fireplaces are convertible. If you have a wood burning and want to convert it to an electric, you can get an insert. And there's different types depending on how old it is. This particular one, it has components down here, but it has a gas shutoff that comes in the form of a key that you stick in a hole on the floor and you turn for the gas shutoff. So it's important to identify the components of the type of fireplace in the house.
All right, so we're in the primary bathroom, and for the most part, as you're walking through, just like the kitchen, a lot of it's going to be cosmetic during a showing, and whether or not they want to upgrade it, make sure that they're aware of the overall condition. But again, you can check the sinks, you can check underneath, see if there's any signs of leaking, the overall condition of the cabinets. You're checking the showers, the towel, the tubs, all that stuff. Toilets, you can kind of move them a little bit, see if they're tight, see if they're loose. See if the floor is soft around the tubs, around the toilet, to see if there's been any moisture damage over time. And bathrooms are a great place for skylights. And skylights, not on every home, but it's important to understand that skylights are a source of leaks because they require maintenance. So just because the roof is new, 5 years, 10 years old, doesn't mean that there's issues or there's not issues with the skylights, because they're prone to leaks because people just forget about them. And there's a lot of components to those that can dry rot and become leak points.
Yes, and we always say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when those skylights are going to leak. So we just want to educate the clients to remember to check the sealant around, go up every now and again, make sure, and you want to seal it from the inside as well as the outside. So there is some more maintenance to skylights versus just the roof that you leave for 25 years and you don't really look at again. Sydney mentioned toilets. We see this in almost all inspections over time. With sitting down and standing up, toilets do become loose. So it is important to see if they move, because the wax seal around the toilets, they wear away. And when they start to move, the potential for it to leak underneath the floor and cause big issues. And especially here, this is tile floor. So if it's leaking underneath, you're not going to know for a long period of time until it's a big item to fix where the wood potentially has to be replaced, etc. So that's an education piece. Sealant around your fixtures, tubs, showers, around the bathtub. Again, big spots to identify where water moisture can enter and potentially be an issue.
And sometimes you'll see those sealant spots, just like we saw on the windows outside, but just in tubs around showers, so which indicates that there's been some moisture issues as well. All right, so walking through the house, as we've said many times so far in this video, you just want to look at the walls, look at the carpet, look at the flooring, checking for, make sure the doors open and close, just real quick. Understanding you typically have a very limited amount of time while you're doing all this. So again, brief viewpoints, big viewpoints, the 30,000 foot view. But as you're going through these rooms, one of the things you can look at is your receptacles. You're not testing them, but on older homes, especially pre-1962 homes, you're checking to see if there's 3-prong or 2-prong, because 2-prong means that the house may not be grounded or may not be updated with the ground wire. And sometimes you just want to know, is there receptacles? Because sometimes we've seen houses that's been renovated and there's no receptacles in the bathrooms and no receptacles in certain rooms, or that every receptacle in that specific room is a 2-prong, which, that's a hard lesson to find out after you've moved in.
Yes.
And you don't have any receptacles at all in the room, or any usable receptacles, depending on what types of devices and whatnot you're going to be plugging into those rooms. And in addition to, you look at the windows, what type of windows do you have? Like this one's broken. If it's wooden, vinyl, single pane, double pane, things like that.
Yeah, so a couple key points that's it's very quick to identify is if they are the wooden ones, such as this one, wood rots, as we have seen on the outside of the house. So it's always a good thing to point out that eventually wooden windows will need to be replaced. You definitely want to keep them painted as well, because if they start to chip away or the sun beats down and it wears that paint away, that's going to allow that moisture to penetrate that wood and they're going to rot faster. And the wooden windows typically are not as efficient with the single panes. And like Sid said, this one here is broken, which is another issue. Vinyl windows obviously last a lot longer, as well as another thing to pay attention, if it's a 2-pane window, sometimes you'll note between the panes it's kind of foggy, or there's moisture, or there's mold. That means you have a broken seal, and that just allows that moisture in. It takes away the life expectancy of the window and causes moisture issues. So you want to pay attention if those broken seals are present and have just the glass pane replaced.
As you're walking through the house, you can check to see what kind of attic access you have. Is it a pull down? Is it a scuttle? Obviously, if it's a scuttle or anything but a pull down or actual stairs, you're not really going to be checking out during the showings. You can walk around and check for staining, wet stains, dry stains, things like that on fresh paint. If spots have been freshly painted, which indicates that there's been a leak at some point. But you can always pull these down, spend a couple of seconds, couple minutes just looking around up there to check to make sure that the framing looks good. There's no cracked wood. Insulation is good, because we've seen new construction and old construction where we've gone up into the attic and there's been zero insulation, and the sellers have complained about high heating and energy bills for however many years. And so you're looking at all that stuff. You're looking to see if there's any signs of leaks or previous leaks while you're up there. So all things that are pretty easy to identify, but again, if you know ahead of time, can really save your clients some trouble and heartache, as well as yourself.
Right, and most clients, the only thing they ask about with the attic is it floored for storage? Do I have storage space? So we're paying attention to that along with everything else. And this particular house had the air handler in the garage. Sometimes it's located in the attic. So that's another thing that Sydney's going to spend a little bit more time paying attention to, looking at the systems if they're located in the attic as opposed to the garage or the crawl space.
Yeah, absolutely. And every now and then you'll get a water heater up in the attic as well. And you want to make sure it has a pan and it's properly drained. Yeah. Because if it doesn't have the proper systems in place to allow it to drain in case there's an incident, then that water's coming down here, right?
Through.
So again, not that there's anything wrong with it, right? It's allowed. You just want to be aware of it. So that way you can properly monitor it.
Exactly. And key points to note as the clients are walking through the house, thinking which bedroom is going to be for each kid and do they like the bathrooms? Is the master big enough? It's the agent's responsibility to be paying attention to those potential red flags. Is there cracking coming from the ceiling, the door frames, a little bit of settlement cracking, the spider cracks from the door frames? In older houses especially, those are pretty common. But if you're starting to see it throughout the house, that's one of those things where we're gonna potentially talk about any structural issues.
So we hope you enjoy this video. We just want to take a few minutes just to show you some things to look for as a realtor or as a client as you're walking through the house. That again, that can save time and money for both parties involved, because it's nothing like going through the house and getting wrapped up in what your vision is for the home, and then come the home inspection time and all of the stuff that could have been pointed out or shown or thought about prior to the offer. Now all of a sudden it comes to light. The buyer gets nervous, they back out, and now we wasted 2 weeks of everybody's time, right?
Right. And it's important. Buying a home is the biggest investment that most families make. And when you have good professionals that want to see our clients end up in something that is not a money pit, or that they have a good investment, it is worth our time. But also, we want to educate. We've heard one too many horror stories from agents and inspectors that didn't do right by the clients. And so it really matters what types of partners you work with on this big investment. And that's the point for this video, is to show some things so that you can be just as educated and we can help you make a great investment.
Absolutely. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.